Hello and welcome to Doubles and Trebles. It's great to be back on the YouTube front. It's myself and Adam Smith, as you'll know, and we're joined by a very special guest for a mini-series that we're calling Inside Betting. And we're joined by Mike Holden. Mike, someone who I've known for a little while and has very kindly agreed to come on the channel. Mike is going to be joining us for 4 videos, a little mini-series looking at some different angles of betting and hopefully giving you something a little bit different to what we've offered before. And yeah, just generally, we're going to be talking about sports betting, but more the psychological processes behind it, which is what Mike kind of specializes in. And then we're also going to be doing some general chit chat about best practices for punting and how to improve your skills in punting skills. But first of all, in this first video, we're going to be getting to know Mike a little bit better and giving you a little bit more context. So Mike is a former football writer, tipster turned professional, I suppose. He's gone with his own venture and now runs Foxpunter, which is a very successful little project that Mike's been running for about 3 years, I think I'm right in saying, where he has a loyal following of members who are paying for his insight on the psychological profiling side of things. If that all sounds new to you, hopefully we're going to get to that and cover that in the coming minutes. Yeah, so as I say, just hoping that you're going to get something a little bit different out of these videos. If you do enjoy them, please remember to give us a like, a comment, and subscribe to the channel. We've been a bit quiet recently, but yeah, this is the first of hopefully a few things like this that we're going to trial. So I'm going to dive straight in. I'll hand over to Adam, who's got the first question, and we're going to firstly get to know Mike a little bit better. So Adam, off you go.
Well, following on from that, yeah, comprehensive introduction there from the Pie Man. Just going back to the beginning, really, Mike, I suppose someone like myself who doesn't really bet on football, but has a strong interest in betting, I was just going to ask you what drew you into the betting side of things. Was it the odds, the percentages, the mathematical challenge, or did you just like the idea of making a few quid like the rest of us?
Yeah, I guess it's probably a common story, really, in that, yeah, I had a local bookmakers around the corner. Grew up in Moss Side in Manchester, a Manchester City fan, so lived right on the doorstep of Main Road. And it was just a local Ladbrokes around the corner. And on a match day, it was easy to kind of just sneak in as a 12, 13-year-old, get your hacker on, no questions asked. And you know that's kind of how it started, yeah. So that was it, really. Yeah, I've always had a head for numbers. I wouldn't say that was the main driving force, but it, I guess. If I was to trace it back to its obvious starting point, I mean, I've got a sister who's much older than me, but I was essentially grew up like an only child because, so you'd have rainy days and stuff like that. And I kind of just got into this habit of like creating games with dice and pen and paper, and I'd create FA Cups and World Cups and stuff like that. And then basically use the dice to decide the scores. In fact, I think it started with Subbuteo. But you can't play Subbuteo on your own. So you got these days and long afternoons on your own. The quickest way to get the results was to get a dice out and start creating tournaments and things like that. So I think that's kind of where I was doing this at sort of 6, 7 years old. So I guess that's where it all started. But what happens is with something like that, the betting mindset comes in that you're just thinking, okay, Walsall winning away at Liverpool, that's not realistic. How can we handicap this with the dice to create a game that makes it more realistic, the scorelines? And that's basically, something I used to do when I was like really, really young. But then, yeah, I'm probably looking at 12, 13 years old, started placing accumulators, never winning, but it was always exciting. I love the colourful slips that you'd write your bets out on, and you'd go around thinking, you'd really grown up, showing everyone your slip. And that was it, really. And then I guess I started taking it seriously when it went tax-free. Offshore betting started late 1990s. Went tax-free in 2000. You could suddenly start betting singles, way down the leagues, not just live games. And so that's when I really started to take it seriously and believe, actually, you can make a profit doing this if you really know what you're doing. And then from that followed a golden period, really, with the Betfair years. The early Betfair years was a really good time for punters of a certain age who just had a little bit of knowledge ahead of the crowd. Because there's a lot of liquidity and, the markets weren't necessarily that, it was easy to win money if you stuck to what you was good at and knew what you were doing and knew how to play those markets. So the early 2000s was a really good period. So that's basically the beginning story is up to that point. And Betfair, those early days of Betfair was the years when you really started believing that you could make this pay. And that's when you can start making it pay. That's when you begin to think, right, this is a lifetime sort of hobby thing. It's not just something that's a passing phase.
I've heard that story a few times, having worked in the industry for 11 years, bit younger than yourself, and along the lines of Betfair, just changed everything. And there's a few people, well, many hundreds, possibly thousands of people that, like yourself, almost made the leap. Possibly didn't have a family or a mortgage at that stage and could make the leap into going it, all in on Betfair and making it pay. I've heard the story many times, and you're another one to add to the list. I think, real turning point in the history of betting.
Mike, can I just ask you about your journalism background? Because you're similar to me, aren't you? That's how you kind of first angled into it, I suppose. And you did a lot of writing. I mean, I was quite familiar with your stuff on Sporting Life and the likes, but I know you had a long time at the Racing Post. You worked with Oddschecker and stuff as well. So, I mean, they do quite mirror up quite nicely, don't they? I mean, I've gone down that path myself of writing. Then I wanted to write about sport, and then I knew a little bit about betting, and you kind of fall into it. Is that how it went for yourself as well? Yeah,
kind of. I think I've always loved the idea of being paid twice for something. So you're doing the research anyway in whatever leagues you're studying and things like that. So if you can get paid twice for your research, you're gonna use it for your betting in any case. But then you can also get paid for writing and sharing that information. Then that's kind of how it came about. But I spent about 10 years working in a casino. Originally, I left sixth form college mid 1990s. And I'd never really had a university sorted. I didn't know what my next step was going to be. And when I was trying to work out, it's all a bit of a mad dash in September time, trying to find a university to go to. And I just ended up on a casino training course in the end with a mate because he was doing it. So I just went along with him. And the next thing, I'm in a casino for 10 years, like dealing roulette, blackjack, dice, especially though. I used to love working on the dice table in Salford. And I did that for about 6 years. It was after about 6 years that I thought, hang on, this is a long year out. It's like, I love the lifestyle. The working night shifts didn't bother me. So I was quite happy to do it. And I loved having a disposable income. And then, like I said, the Betfair years start, and then you start having lots more disposable income. And I suppose the time that you're spending working 40 hours a week and overtime in a casino, you're thinking, right, I actually don't want to be doing this for the rest of my life. And that's kind of when I decided, right, okay, well, if you could do anything, what would you want to do? What's the next step? And it was journalism just felt like an obvious route because I'd also done, so in fact, around the same time, I was in the second Manchester City fanzine that I produced. I used to be an editor of one in the early 90s. Then I let that go for a few years and then started doing another one in the late 1990s. So I was already kind of doing journalism, but as what now is like content creator type material. And then so it was like a logical step, really, that was what I would go into for a long-term career.
Excellent. So when you've decided to kind of leave the journalism behind and start your own venture, was that something that you'd always fancied doing, or was it a natural step? And was it a scary period for you when you did make the leap?
It's definitely scary, yeah. It's funny, really, because it's been a tough few years in the sense that so many different things happen at once. I mean, the world's changed in so many ways for so many people anyway. But with the journalism, I mean, I don't know when it started, but you just started getting squeezed in the sort of, 2014, 2015. I'm not sure roughly, but you have been demanded on to do more for less, and you're having to turn around more copies. Social media, basically. He's just got to churn out so much content nowadays. And I've never really been particularly good at volume content. I like to go deep on subjects and really analyze things. And a lot of my content was quite niche content as well. So I was getting, because of social media and the desire for clicks and numbers, I was getting like editors and, coming back to me saying it's a bit too niche for us, that, some sort of feature on second division referees or whatever it might be. And, just something completely random, but I've gone down a statistical route, something that's taken my fancy, and just think there's an interesting story in this. A lot of my features and stuff were getting a bit too niche, and I was just getting less money for, because I would put so much time into some of my articles that, just could, it's about getting into flow, basically. I just couldn't churn out article after article after, not something I was capable of doing. So that kind of, the writing was on the wall for journalism probably about 3-4 years before I actually decided to take the decision myself to just completely cut ties and move on, because it was just, income diminishing on that score. But also at the same time, income was diminishing from the betting as well. I've kind of taken it for granted for too many. I've built on the Betfair platform. It's not like I've always been solidly profitable year on year on year. But for the most part, it was a case of, it was a sideline. So I'd have a job, which was initially casinos, then journalism, and then doing bits of trading for a syndicate, or doing, sort of consultancy work for bookmakers, or just little bits and pieces. And then I'd kind of always like to get to the end of May and be able to cream something off the top of the betting bank that I could put my feet up for 2 months in May. But all the while, I've never really built anything up along the way. I've just always kind of had this easy come, easy go mentality towards it all. And then everything just kind of all the chickens came on to roost, I suppose, on that mentality around the same time. Because then I was suddenly finding it really difficult to make a profit betting. I was struggling for income from journalism, and then I put all money into a business and trying to build a business up from the. So it was just like a really difficult time. The other thing I want to mention as well, 2 kids. My first one was born 2013, and my second was born 2015. So you're raising 2 children, it's a complete game changer. It's like in terms of just your whole perspective on everything. And suddenly you're thinking about security. You're not thinking about, the way that you used to be about things. Then you're struggling for income from the journalism, and you're not making the betting pay. So it's a really, really tough period. But yeah, I kind of just, Foxpunter officially launched as a business in 2018. I was kind of as a sideline business, sharing the ratings with a short group of subscribers from about 2016. I think it started as a rating service in that. But then I kind of latched on to the profiling and took Foxpunter in a new way. I basically just went all in from about 2018 onwards. The summer of 2018 was when I decided, right, this is it now. I'm going to cut all ties with the journalism, and I'm going all in on the business, because it's the only way I felt like it was really going to succeed. If I was going to make it pay, then this is what I had to do.
If I can just ask you about Foxpunter a little bit more, Mike, we don't want to go into too much detail because we will cover it in, the actual practice of it in future discussion. But for anyone who's not heard or not aware of Foxpunter, and this certainly, I very much approached you. You've not come on here to plug your product or anything like that, but just give us a bit of an overview of what people get with the Foxpunter service.
Yeah, well, basically, it's a tipping service. It's more than just a tipping service, but everybody knows it for the tipping service now, because I've kind of built it around how good the tips have been since it became purely manager profiling. But it's a tipping service, first and foremost, around psychological profiling. So my passion over the past few years has been to psychologically profile football managers. And I believe that all football teams are a representation of the manager. So they behave as a team will behave in the ways collectively of the manager's values, the manager's behaviours, and the cues that the manager puts on the team. That team will begin to reflect the manager, especially more so the longer the manager's been in charge. So basically, managers have always been a big focus through my journalism, and I was never really particularly sure why until I got into psychological profiling. But I've always put a big focus on managers for some reason, trying to understand how managers' minds work and what they're going to do next and things like that. So it's always been a big feature in all the work that I used to do as a journalist. So basically, that's the flagship enterprise of Foxpunter, is the tipping service now. But it's also, there's a lot of ratings and data with it. So I do my own match ratings, which was my previous edge. In around 2013 was probably the height of the success I had with the rating system, which was basically an early XG model, a late XG model if you're talking, the biggest syndicates who really smashed it up, but earlier than most average punters. And in a really good year, 18 months around 2013 time, and then kind of decided to start sharing the ratings because I smashed it up for a short period with those ratings, but then thought, right, okay, this clearly isn't going to keep going forever at that rate. So how else do I, try to make use of this? Again, it's like doing journalism and getting paid twice for your betting. How could I get paid twice for the ratings? And it was to share it as a subscription service. So that was basically the route. That was how Foxpunter was formed, as a rating service. Since then, I've added like XG ratio tables, market moves data, so I track the markets in a way that I don't believe anybody else does. I'm not entirely sure. But it tracks the Asian handicap markets and closing prices against Thursday and Friday prices, and just tries to provide all these tools that go alongside the tipping service. So I think my main objective is with the tools and the data side is it's just trying to make people's lives easier, basically, punters' lives easier, to get to answers quicker and to just create things that are better than what's out there. So, a lot of statistical websites aren't necessarily set up for punters. They're trying to accommodate everybody at the same time. But it can be quite an arduous process going through all the different stats websites to try. You might want to look at head-to-head records on one website. Then you have to go to a different website to look at something else. So you've got the research time. I've become a bit fixated with trying to cut down my own research time, but in a way that I can share it with everybody, that it would be just as helpful to someone else as it is to me, even if they take a different process. So I think what it is that what I've come to learn about my personality type is that I love creating systems of things that just, that time-saving systems especially. So the match ratings, the market moves data, the XG ratio tables, these are just all ways of arriving at quicker answers. And at the moment, it's spreadsheets. I just send out these spreadsheets and I do videos alongside the spreadsheets that explains, my chain of thought of how I look at this data, that helps people then to learn to look at it in their own ways, but seeing how someone else uses it, they find it helpful. And I guess that's it, really. There's so much more that's been added in the last 12 months only, because I kind of started working with a sales coach and who started giving me ideas, who's worked with other companies that have done content creation courses and stuff. And he kind of suggested the hangout calls and developing the sense of community and interacting with people on a weekly basis. And so now the Thursday night hangout calls have become a new thing where we kind of take a different league every Thursday and we're just, once a month. So since the last month, what's happened in that league? Let's go through, say, 10 or 12 of the 24 teams. Any major transfers, any managerial changes, anything particularly relevant has happened in the data. That's the percent. As the market suddenly really want to be with some team, well, why is that? And we just try and run through, brainstorm basically, all these different things that might have happened in the past month to just kind of stay abreast as the season goes along. Of keep a handle on teams. So take a bit of a zoom back once a week on a different league, and. So it seems to be building year on year, and I always forget some of the things that have been added. But yeah, it's just the modern digital course basically. So I've been on loads of these different courses in recent years around psychology and personality typing, and entrepreneurial courses for building a business. So I've seen how all these different courses have packaged things and shared things. So with my journalism background and my knowledge of these courses, I just try to put as many exciting and interesting things that I can in without necessarily draining my own energy and still having enough time to do all the stuff that I do. So it's just trying to do as much as I can with what I'm passionate about.
Well, there seems to be a growing list of things on offer through the Foxpunter.
I can vouch for it, honestly. I've seen the back end of it. It's as good as it sounds. It really is an amazing collection of tools and work and research, and the community side of it is, I think, is another unique feature, to be honest. I think having that feel that, everyone's on the similar level, got the same intense amount of interest in a certain topic. I mean, sometimes I find myself with punting, sometimes you're talking to someone about, find a value or something, you're wondering, are they really as arsed as me about this conversation, But I feel like, you've got a community there, Mike, that really are all into it and all pulling in the same direction, and it helps find results, doesn't it, when everyone's got that enthusiasm? Yeah,
it's brilliant. It's really good. And the hangout calls, weren't my idea, but within about one of the best coups we had last season, actually, and I'll name check Jamie Luck, someone who've come to know well, who's, one of the subscribers. Basically, it was on a hangout call and he brought up the issue of Southend and, we're bottom of the table, really struggling. We were kind of chatting through Southend and the fact that defensively the numbers were picking up. And then the week prior to the game, Mark Mosley come in for a lot of criticism. They played a Papa John's Trophy game against Colchester, bit of a local rivalry. They got walloped 6-1. we kind of talked our way through this and thought, hang on, if they don't get a result at Walsall this weekend, they're in big trouble. He's in big trouble. His position as manager, but also the criticism from the fans is going to be faced, because they've got to justify the fact that you just lost to local rivals 6-1. They've got to respond. So we kind of, pretty much everyone who was on the call and lots of people, on the course, we're all backing Southend clean sheet, and quite a lot about Southend to win the game as well. The tip that I put forward, Southend clean sheet and the 0-0 correct score. And it was added to multiples and stuff as well. Anyway, Southend won 1-0 in the sort of 89th minute. So I was a bit cursing a little bit that the 0-0 went down. But plenty of people have backed the Southend win as well as the Southend clean sheet. And it just came from a conversation on the hangout call like that. Very casual, very, but you just kind of go down a rabbit hole, you explore, whatever the talking point is. And quite a few bets from last season emerged from those hangout calls, where it's like I do the hangout call on a Thursday night, then I record my videos, the tips go out on a Friday afternoon, I record the videos around Friday, late Friday morning, lunchtime. And yeah, there's a real good handful of decent coups that come out of just those conversations on a Thursday night that wasn't particularly on my radar in the week leading up to that. But then I sit down on Friday morning, it's fresh in my mind, and the conclusions that I came to from that conversation, and it's in there in the tips,
Excellent. So psychology is a large part of the approach that you take. I mean, it fascinates me because I've never heard anyone talk about the psychology of sport, managers particularly, often forgotten is the way I would see it. So yeah, I just find it really, really interesting. I've never heard anyone else offering anything like the service you offer. Won't go into too much detail now. We'll probably be covering on other videos the psychology particularly, but has that always been an interest of yours? I'm guessing it has, the psychology side of things.
Yeah, not consciously until recent years. Like I've always known it's been a bit of an interest there. What I didn't realise until I started understanding personality type, but this is kind of a flow state for me, is that I'm always trying to understand what's going on in people's heads. And so it's like, everybody has this one mental cognitive function that's just an effortless flow state. You start doing it when you're young. It's like being left-handed or right-handed. You do one thing or the other, and it's like there's these different ways of looking at the world. And for me, that was just what it was. It was like, I'm guessing as a very, very young child, I would always think, I'd always second guess myself and think, why did I do that? What was I thinking to make you do that? So that, and then it goes on to another level, and you're thinking, well, why did he think? What did he think in order to do that? And you start trying to guess what might have gone on in people's heads that led to the behaviours that follow. And this just becomes it's just like a computer that never stops running. You're just constantly trying to think of these patterns of thought and behaviour and stuff like that. But it's because it's effortless. It's purely subconscious. You don't even know that you're doing it. You don't realise that other people aren't doing it. It's just kind of so obvious that what goes on in your world, you think, other people are thinking that way as well. And it's only in recent years I've come to understand all of this. So now I realise, psychology is like a massive thing for me. And it's always been there in my life, and it's always been something I've been interested in, but never realised that this is like a button that I couldn't switch off. So now I've kind of, just gone really deep into it the last 3 or 4 years and made it like understood that, okay, this can be a real strength for yours, because if not everybody else is doing this, you've already thought through so many different things and concepts that you're coming across in psychology that, well, let's go and sort of understand all the theory behind it and try and put some structure in place and see how you can use this for your betting and, use it in so many different ways, personal development as well.
I don't envy you because I did a A-level psychology, and it's the hardest I've ever had to work in my whole life professionally. I've done a degree after that, and there was a doddle compared to that psychology A-level. I had to work really hard to get that C, and I won't be going back to it anytime soon. So you can do all the psychology hard work, Mike.
Well, I was gonna ask you about the profiling side of things, which you just mentioned there, Mike, because obviously that's something I believe from our conversations you went and did a course, off your own back, personality hacker and stuff like that, and you're still honing those skills. So how much importance do you put on your own kind of personal development and, to continue learning and continue honing those skills?
Yeah, quite a lot, to be honest. It's become, this is all a journey that kind of ties in. That basically, I guess the big step was I quit alcohol. in February 2018, stopped drinking. I just decided, right, smashed it up for 25 years. Enough's enough. I was like, hangovers was just getting worse and worse and worse. And it's, you've got this situation where your betting's not paying, you're getting no money from journalism, you've got 2 kids. It's like someone's got to give somewhere. And it wasn't going to be the betting. The drink was was always going to be the first to go ahead of the betting. So that's kind of a decision I took in 2018, because I kind of started getting into all this personal development stuff and I'm just trying to think, how can I get more out of myself in order, because, I was really struggling to make ends meet on a month-to-month basis, like really struggling in a way that I'd never done before in my life. And, suddenly, you're in Spain, detached from all your family and stuff like that. And it's, you've got all these challenges that you're meeting. So that was kind of the driving force for that. But the personal development started just before. I think that just gave me the kick up the backside to say, come on, if you're going to do something, what's the best possible thing you could do for yourself? And for me, it was to quit the booze. So that's what I did. And then on the back of that, joined a psychological profiling course in America, and went to Los Angeles in November 2018 for a live event. It's 5 days, really intense, 12-hour days, non-stop. Loads of people with my personality type or similar personality types, like just constantly, analytical sort of how do people's minds work type people. These just abstract conversations just going on for 12 hours a day, really intense sort of event it was. I come back just knowing so much, and had all these new ideas and new things that I could map things to, all sorts of, you think of all the angles in betting that you think you might base a case, build a bet around. Imagine suddenly having this framework that you can put things in specific places and have language for this, being able to understand all these new things and new concepts. So I returned from Los Angeles with that. That's when I started kind of really pushing the idea of profiling, and this was going to be the next big thing in football betting, because, I'd seen how my edge had disappeared from match ratings and XG data. So I really kind of went to town in email marketing campaigns and stuff like that, just saying, I think this is the next big thing. And talk about art and science and generational cycles. And there's all these different mental models, not just psychological profiling, but in the last few years, I've just kind of gained this real thirst for understanding mental models, and just because I find it really difficult to logically sort information. I have to, and these mental models help me to organize information in my own mind. Some people are just able to just store their heads full of information and just recall whatever they want when they need to recall it. And I just can't do that in the slightest. So having all these mental models to be able to map things to, and having all this language to be able to make sense of these different concepts, it just used to be sort of random instincts that you couldn't really explain in any real sense. So all these mental models have helped me. So basically I've kind of lost my chain of thought there, but I was Los Angeles 2018, the psychological profiling was the main event that was the game changer. And then I basically just been able to start to see how the future of football betting, you think back to Tony Bloom and Matthew Benham in sort of the early 2000s. Moneyball came out in 2005. They big syndicate operations, early 2000s. So, we're all sort of thinking we're smashing it up on Betfair, but they're in the big Asian handicap world at the same time, having that market to themselves and understanding that, and becoming the first people to understand XG data and XG models, building on the Moneyball story. Thinking, right, how do we apply this to football? So then that's how they've smashed it up. But I think these things go in cycles. It's talking about mental models. Things move in 3 to 4 year cycles, but then bigger cycles of 20 years, I believe. 20, 25 years, because it's a full generation of people. So you're going back, 20 years now to those years of when you could say the science cycle started. And I think there's a more artistic, intuitive cycle coming, that people who can understand, how the mind works, or emotional intelligence, or these kinds of things stand to gain, because I think computers are just outdoing each. It's got to such a level now. The markets are so saturated with XG data and with data science that it's all cancelling to zero for the most part. I don't think anyone's really got an edge with that anymore. So it's the people that can understand that, because you can't ignore what data science, you can't you can't just ignore XG and then go punting and thinking, oh, that's a wrong price because they're 14th in the table against the team in second. I'd rather trust the XG than what a league table tells me. But I think the next cycle, I think the people who are going to be most profitable and make the most money, they're going to be the people that can understand just human dynamics. It doesn't have to be understanding how the mind works. It just has to be understanding these things that are not to do with data. But you can't just completely refute the data. And I've just kind of bought into this vision wholeheartedly in the past 2 or 3 years. And it's not let me down. It's just, the profits that came last year with the Foxpunter Masterclass kind of just not, I wouldn't even say vindication. It's just confirmation of what I already felt and knew beforehand. And now it's just really exciting to see something developing like this. So I'd say this is possibly the 3rd time I've really felt like I've got a real edge. But it feels like the first time that I really understand what's going on. And I can actually, it's not just something like I've been stupid and naive in the past because of just immature, basically, not understanding how to save money, not understanding that edges don't last forever, not understanding how to, gain the compound effects on something that lasts for way into the future. And I've never really understood those things. So edges have come and gone in waves, and I've just, it's just been something that I've had for 18 months maybe, and then it's just eluded me, and then you're kind of scraping around. This feels like the first time that I really understand what's going on, and I'm just doing everything that I possibly can to make sure that every decision I'm taking is for the potential long-term gains, and not just trying to go ballistic now and cash in as much as I can, but being reckless in any way about it. I just, it's all part of my learning and development stuff that I want to do anyway. It's kind of, again, it's all these things are going hand in hand at the moment. So it's really exciting.
Really, really interesting. I can say, even from this first conversation we're having, I'm already thinking about, what could I improve on the horses? It's mad. Just before we finish this section of the chat, I went to look you up on social media, Mike, and I hit a brick wall. And Matt then informed me that you've not been present on Twitter or anything like that for some time. What was the thinking behind that? Because most people, including us, have got a little Twitter account trying to get people to follow Doubles and Trebles, etc. And you're not on there. What's the thinking?
Yeah, that was another decision I took. I don't know when it was now. This Foxpunter still has a Twitter account, but I only go on there kind of on Saturday evenings when the post-match interviews are coming through from managers, and all the local radio stations are posting their links and stuff like that. And I might pop on every, for 20 minutes here and there during the week. So I just found it a real drain on my energy and my resources to get things done. It's just, my timeline changed, it all changed, didn't it? With Brexit and Trump and, I used to love social media. I used to love what the platform was. And yet the same timeline, the same people turn, not all the same people, but, you're just looking down your timeline. You don't even know where to start culling it, because it's like people who used to have really good conversations about really interesting things about football and stuff with people. And you see some people just turn really hateful about politics and it just became, it's like that. I guess it's just like that pub where you used to go when you was 18, 19 years old, and it's great for a while, and then the bad crowd turn up and you just have to start going somewhere else. And that's kind of what it, but a big part of my personal development work is deep work, the concept of deep work, and Cal Newport's done a few books, So Good They Can't Ignore You, Deep Work, and Digital Minimalism. And it's basically all built around the same concept, and it's about getting into flow. So the more time you can spend getting into flow without little distractions in your life, the more you'll get achieved, the more things you'll do. And it's just, it's something I've really bought into. So this was all part of it. It's like the number one killer of your time and your chances of getting into flow is social media. And, it's like, for example, they say it takes 30 on average. I mean, it's just a bit of a random figure, but they say it takes 38 minutes to get into flow. That real, when you're just studying one thing and then you get to a point where you go so deep into it that you just lose all sense of time and space, and you're just so focused on what it is you're doing. On an average, it takes the average person 38 minutes to get into flow. And, if you're checking your social media accounts every sort of 20 minutes, you're never ever going to get there, you know. And it's the biggest thing that pulls you away from being able to ever get into flow and do those things that you really love doing the most. So yeah, it's just that's it really. I think a lot of the stuff I'm saying as well, though, it's like, it's not like really like I made a massively conscious decision at the time, and this was the reason. It's like you rationalize it afterwards. You make the decision on an impulse for whatever reason, and then it all begins to make sense why you did it afterwards, or you put the logic to it afterwards. So I guess that's just another one of those things.
Well, it's all very interesting stuff to me anyway, and I'm sure we could go on a bit longer as well, but we will wrap this one up. This is the first video, so ideally that's kind of, giving you sufficiently clued up on Mike, and you'll tune into the next video where we get a little bit deeper on the actual theory side of things and, ways that we can improve ourselves. I mean, you're talking about flow state. That's definitely something that I want to know a bit more about, my flow state and what I can do to improve the way I work, because, God, I get distracted by all sorts. I feel like I have no attention span, but there we are anyway. The link to our other 3 videos with Mike should hopefully be appearing in the description below, along with some info about Foxpunter if you want to have a little look at what Mike's doing in a bit more detail. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and make sure you check out our next video in this series, which is all about edges and finding the edge. Cheers for watching.